I'm pregnant.
Are you sure?
I'm pregnant. Zariah Kincaid did not whisper it. She did not soften it. She said it the way she always spoke in boardrooms. Calm, measured, certain. Orion Halberg did not move. Outside her apartment window, the city moved like nothing had shifted. Cars passed. Lights blinked. Elevators climbed steel towers he partly owned. Inside that small living room, everything stopped. He stared at her, as if numbers might rearrange the outcome. "You're sure?" His voice stayed controlled, but his jaw tightened. She nodded once. Yes. Silence. Not confusion. Not chaos. Wait. He built his life on planning. 5-year projections. Risk assessment. Strategic exits. This was not on any chart. He stood up, sat back down, pressed his fingers to his lips. For the first time since she met him, he looked like a man without a prepared answer. She watched him closely. Not begging, not pleading, waiting. "And before we go further, let me ask you something. Have you ever been wanted in private, but never chosen in public? If that question hits somewhere personal, stay with me. And if you believe love should never hide behind comfort, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to Love Tales with Mr. Easton. You don't want to miss how this unfolds." Back in that room, Orion finally spoke. "This changes things." Zariah held his gaze. It already did. He once believed he could control desire. He never planned to become a father with the woman he told he would never date. The room stayed quiet after his last words. No shouting, no accusations, just two people measuring what the future would cost. Orion leaned back slowly. His mind moved fast, but his body stayed still. Years of executive training taught him how to control reaction. Investors respected restraint. Markets rewarded composure. But this was not a market. This was a child. His child. He looked at Zariah again, differently this time. Not as his analyst, not as the woman he met in private, not as the secret he tried to compartmentalize, as the mother of his legacy. "How far along?" he asked. 8 weeks. Another pause. He stood and walked toward the window. The skyline stretched wide beneath him, steel and glass rising from decisions he made. For years, he believed he controlled outcomes. He shaped companies. He shifted industries. Now something irreversible was growing beyond his control. Behind him, Zariah did not fill the silence. She did not rush to reassure him. She did not reduce herself to make the news easier to absorb. She let him sit inside it. He turned around slowly. "Does anyone else know?" No. His next question hovered in the air. Not about the baby. About perception. About headlines. About what this would mean for the man who once said something he believed was safe. The silence between them said more than words could. This was no longer about attraction. It was about accountability, the sentence that started it all 2 months earlier. His office, top floor, glass walls, clean lines, controlled air. Zariah stood across from his desk with a proposal in her hand. She had just dismantled a failing acquisition plan in 10 precise minutes. Calm, direct, brilliant. He admired that about her. He also feared it. The room emptied after the meeting. Assistants gone. Doors shut. City humming below. He stepped closer than usual. "You're dangerous," he said quietly. She didn't step back. "To your ego?" "To my control." The air shifted. Attraction had been building for weeks. Late nights. Shared flights. Eyes that held a second too long. He could have left it there. Instead, he said it. "I don't date black women." Not loud. Not angry. Final. As if stating company policy. Zariah did not blink. "So don't date me," she replied evenly. "Just don't pretend this isn't mutual." He expected hurt. Maybe retreat. What he got was dignity. That was the moment the balance changed. He wanted her, but he wanted his comfort more. And now, sitting in her apartment with the truth between them, that sentence returned. He heard it again. Clear, certain, confident. He had believed it protected him. He did not know it would come back demanding an answer. That sentence was never about preference. It was about position. Orion Hallberg did not just run a company. He moved markets. He sat on panels with men who measured worth in optics and legacy. He understood how investors watched him, how board members evaluated every public move. He dated women who fit that world. Predictable. Approved. Safe. Zariah did not enter rooms quietly because she lacked presence. She entered quietly because she understood she would be studied the second she spoke. She had built her career mastering spaces that were never designed for her. In meetings, she challenged Orion without flinching. She corrected projections. She refused to soften her analysis to protect his pride. That unsettled him. He respected her mind, desired her confidence, admired her discipline. But loving her openly would mean challenging the circle that shaped him. That was the power dynamic. He held financial power, public authority, the last word in boardrooms. She held something different, self-possession. She never chased validation, never begged to be chosen, never negotiated her worth. When he told her he did not date black women, he believed he was drawing a boundary. What he was revealing was fear. And now, with a child on the way, the balance had shifted. He could no longer hide behind image. The fire he lit. Back in her apartment, Orion faced her again. The past hung between them, but the future demanded clarity. "I need time," he said carefully. Zariah did not argue. She did not raise her voice. "You've had time," she replied. "You just didn't need courage." That landed harder than the pregnancy. For years he convinced himself that attraction was manageable, that private affection required no public cost, that what he felt could exist without consequence. Now there was consequence. A child does not hide in the background of a billionaire's life. A child forces alignment. He studied her face. No fear, no desperation, just steadiness. She was not asking to be chosen. She was asking him to decide what kind of man he intended to be. Outside, the city lights flickered against the night. Inside, something shifted. For the first time, Orion understood this was not about reputation. It was about integrity. He once said he would never date black women. Now he was about to become a father with one. And the real question was no longer whether he loved her. It was whether he would stand beside her when it cost him something. This is where the story begins. Orion Hallberg did not grow up reckless. He grew up watched. His father believed men earned respect through restraint. Emotions were managed. Weakness stayed private. Reputation came first. At 16, Orion learned how to shake hands without revealing nerves. At 21, he learned how to enter rooms filled with men twice his age and leave with signed commitments. By 35, he had built Hallberg Systems into a force investors trusted because he never surprised them. Predictability became his currency. His social circle reflected that discipline. Private clubs, curated friendships, conversations about equity, growth, and expansion. Every partnership aligned with long-term advantage. He dated within that ecosystem. Women who understood discretion. Women who knew how to stand beside him without complicating perception. No public scandals. No messy headlines. No unpredictable variables. His world rewarded control. What it did not reward was emotional risk. So he trained himself to separate admiration from attachment, chemistry from commitment, desire from decision. He believed control made him strong. What he did not yet understand was this: control can protect a man from chaos. It can also isolate him from growth. Orion never dated casually. Every relationship had parameters. He preferred women introduced through trusted circles. Educated, polished, socially acceptable. The kind who photographed well at charity boards and corporate retreats. There were dinners at refined restaurants. Weekend trips planned months ahead. Conversations that never challenged the structure of his life. He kept things clean. No public affection beyond what investors expected. No emotional entanglements that threatened his focus. When relationships ended, they ended quietly. No broken reputations. No dramatic fallout. He called it maturity. In truth, it was insulation. He chose partners who blended into his existing framework. No one who would require him to defend his choice. No one who would force him to examine inherited assumptions. It was efficient. It was controlled. It was hollow. He did not hate the women he dated. He simply never allowed himself to need them. Love in his mind should complement ambition. It should never complicate it. That belief remained unchallenged until Zariah Kincaid began sitting across from him in strategy meetings, refusing to shrink when he tested her logic. She did not blend. She stood. Zariah Kincaid never raised her voice to command a room. She did not need to. She prepared harder than everyone else. She spoke only when necessary. When she did, the room adjusted. Her analysis cut through inflated projections. Her questions exposed weak assumptions. She did not soften feedback to protect fragile egos. Orion noticed that first. Not her beauty, not her curls, not the way her skin caught light near the window. Her mind. In meetings, she challenged him directly. That expansion model overlooks regional volatility. Calm, direct, unafraid. Most employees framed disagreement carefully. Zariah delivered truth without aggression. It unsettled him. He valued intelligence, but he was accustomed to being the sharpest strategist in the room. With her, he had to stay alert. She did not seek approval. She sought accuracy. There was confidence in that. Not loud confidence. Grounded confidence. And it drew him in. He began anticipating her perspective before she spoke, watching for her reaction when deals shifted. She became the only person whose silence in a room made him reconsider his stance. That influence was subtle and dangerous, because attraction built on admiration is harder to dismiss. It did not start with grand gestures. It started with proximity, late meetings where the office emptied, but they remained reviewing projections. Shared flights where conversation drifted from quarterly reports to childhood stories. Brief laughter over coffee when a presentation glitched. He noticed details he should not have noticed. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating. The calm steadiness in her eyes when negotiations tightened. The faint smile she allowed herself when a deal closed in their favor. None of it crossed lines, but the awareness grew. One evening, as rain tapped against the windows of the executive floor, she stood beside him reviewing a contract, close enough that he could feel warmth from her shoulder. He focused harder on the document. She asked a question about restructuring clauses. He answered too quickly. She tilted her head slightly, catching the shift in his tone. "Are you distracted?" she asked lightly. "No," he replied, too firm. He was, not by the numbers, by her presence. Attraction does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it builds in quiet recognition, and every quiet moment made it harder for him to pretend nothing was changing. The first time their hands met, it was unintended. They both reached for the same contract at the same time. Her fingers brushed his. A simple touch, but his reaction was immediate. Heat traveled up his arm, not imagined, not subtle. He pulled back as if the contact burned. She noticed. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second longer than professional etiquette allowed. Neither spoke, but something shifted. He cleared his throat and stepped away from the desk. "I'll have legal review the revisions." She nodded slowly. Of course. The air felt different after that. He avoided standing too close, avoided unnecessary proximity, avoided looking at her longer than required. That single moment exposed what he had tried to manage internally. Desire. Not superficial attraction, real, disruptive desire. It threatened the order he built around himself. And he did not like threats, especially ones he could not negotiate. Within a week, Orion adjusted their workflow. He reassigned some meetings, delegated projects that required late collaboration, reduced travel overlap. He framed it as strategic efficiency. Zariah understood the shift instantly. "You're restructuring communication channels," she observed calmly during a briefing. "It's operational," he replied. She held his gaze for a second longer than usual. "If you say so." Distance did not weaken the tension. It sharpened it. When she entered rooms, he noticed more because he was trying not to notice. When she spoke, he listened more carefully because he was trying not to engage. Control, once effortless, now required energy. One evening, after she presented a revised growth forecast that impressed the board, he found himself watching her gather her papers. He could not deny it anymore. Attraction had already taken root. The real conflict was no longer whether he felt something. It was whether his ego would allow him to act on it. Control built his empire, but control was starting to feel like a cage. The distance Orion tried to create did not last. Quarterly expansion demanded precision, and Zariah remained the sharpest strategist on his team. Spreadsheets stretched across conference tables long after sunset. The rest of the staff left in waves, offering polite goodnights. Orion and Zariah stayed. The building changed at night. Conversations lowered. Footsteps echoed. The glass walls reflected only 2 figures instead of an entire workforce. She sat across from him, sleeves rolled neatly, voice steady as she dissected risk models. He watched the way she approached problems, never defensive, never hesitant. She did not perform intelligence. She lived inside it. "Your projected margin assumes stable supply costs," she said one evening. "That's optimistic." He leaned back. "You disagree?" "I refine." That answer made him smile before he could stop himself. They began finishing each other's strategic sentences, anticipating objections, building solutions in rhythm. Silence between them no longer felt awkward. It felt charged. He told himself the connection was intellectual. 2 ambitious minds aligning. But when their knees brushed beneath the table and neither moved away, the truth felt less abstract. Work was no longer just work. It was proximity, and proximity was becoming dangerous. The investor tour required them to travel together. Private jet, tight schedules, shared presentation responsibilities, limited space. On the plane, they reviewed slides side by side. Her shoulder occasionally touched his. Each contact lasted only seconds, yet lingered longer in his awareness. In Chicago, after a 12-hour negotiation, they walked back to the hotel in cool night air. She loosened her hair from its professional hold. He noticed. "You were strong in there," he said. "So were you." Their compliments were measured. Still, something softer moved beneath them. At dinner with regional partners, she matched his intensity. When a senior executive questioned her projection, she responded without flinching. Orion watched the room adjust to her clarity. Later, in the hotel elevator, silence settled between them. Just the 2 of them. Close quarters. Slow ascent. He felt it again. Not admiration, want. When the doors opened, she stepped out first. "Good night, Orion," she said, voice even. He stood in the elevator a moment longer after she left. The line he once stated confidently began to feel less like a boundary and more like a challenge he no longer wanted to defend. Back in the city, tension grew heavier instead of fading. One evening, after a successful merger vote, they remained alone in his office reviewing final notes. The lights were dimmer than usual. The skyline stretched wide behind them. She stood near his desk, holding a folder to her chest. He walked around the desk instead of staying behind it. "That presentation today," he began, stopping short. "Yes? You make me better." The words surprised him. She searched his face carefully. "That's the goal." "No," he said quietly. "You challenge me." Her breath shifted slightly. "And that bothers you?" she asked. "It complicates things. Only if you let it." Silence followed. Not tense. Expectant. He stepped closer than necessary. Close enough to notice the warmth in her eyes. Close enough to feel his composure thinning. "I shouldn't," he said, more to himself than to her. "Shouldn't what?" He almost said it. Almost admitted that she occupied his thoughts beyond office hours. That her absence changed his focus. That control was losing its grip. Instead, he straightened. "We should finalize the numbers." Professional again. The moment passed, but not completely. The storm trapped them in the building. Rain hit the glass hard. Traffic stalled below. Staff left early. Elevators slowed. They stood near the window, watching lightning cut across the sky. "You ever get tired of being careful?" she asked softly. He did not pretend to misunderstand. Careful keeps things intact. Or confined. He turned toward her, close again. No board members, no investors, no audience, just 2 people aware of what had been building for weeks. "I told you before," he said quietly. "I remember," she replied. He saw no fear in her, only steadiness. That steadiness undid him. He reached for her slowly, giving her space to step away. She did not. The kiss was unhurried, gentle at first, testing. His hand rested at her waist, hesitant. Hers moved to his chest, feeling the rapid beat beneath tailored fabric. There was no rush, no aggression, just recognition. When he deepened the kiss slightly, she responded with equal intention. Breath mingled, barriers thinned. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel without calculating consequence. The storm outside faded into background noise. Inside, something undeniable took shape. When they separated, their foreheads rested together briefly. He inhaled slowly, as if regaining structure. "This changes nothing," he said. The words sounded hollow even to him. She stepped back just enough to see his face clearly. "Nothing?" she asked gently. "We remain professional, discreet." He had already begun rebuilding walls. What they shared in that moment had been honest, vulnerable, real, but fear returned quickly. Fear of perception, fear of stepping outside expectation, fear of explaining himself to circles that valued uniformity over courage. She studied him carefully. "You don't have to protect yourself from me," she said. "I'm protecting more than myself." There it was. The difference. He was willing to kiss her in private. He was not ready to stand beside her in public. "And now let me ask you something. Would you stay with someone who loves you privately but fears you publicly? If that question challenges you, stay with this story. And if you believe love deserves daylight, make sure you support Love Tales with Mr. Easton by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Because this choice is only beginning." Zariah did not regret the kiss. She replayed it later that night, alone in her apartment. The warmth of his hand at her waist. The way his voice lowered when he lost control for a second. He wanted her. That was clear. But desire is not the same as courage. She stood in front of her mirror, studying her reflection. She had worked too hard to build herself into a woman who required secrecy to feel chosen. She understood his world. Understood the pressure. Understood the expectations that shaped him. She did not understand settling. The memory of his sentence returned. "I don't date black women." He had crossed that line physically. He had not crossed it publicly. Could she accept being compartmentalized? She felt the pull of attraction strongly. His intelligence matched hers. His vulnerability beneath control intrigued her. But she also felt something else. Self-respect. If this was going to continue, it would not be at the cost of her dignity. The kiss had ignited something beautiful. It had also exposed the fault line between them. And fault lines, if ignored, do not disappear. They widen. They widen. He invited her without ceremony. "No meetings, no interruptions," he said simply. His penthouse overlooked the river, wide glass panels revealing the quiet sweep of water beneath city lights. No assistants, no schedules, just stillness. She arrived in soft denim and a fitted sweater, curls loose, face free of corporate polish. He had never seen her this relaxed. It shifted something in him. They ordered takeout instead of chef-prepared meals. Sat on the floor with plates balanced on the coffee table. Talked without agenda. There was no rush. When he reached for her hand this time, it was deliberate. His thumb brushed over her knuckles slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. The first kiss that night carried none of the urgency of the storm. It was steady, intentional. His hand moved gently along her waist, not claiming, not demanding. She responded with equal care, fingers sliding into his hair, breath warming his cheek. When he lifted her into his arms later, he paused, searching her eyes for consent. She nodded once. In his private space, he was not guarded. He was tender, and that tenderness felt real. Morning light filtered across the bedroom quietly. She lay beside him, tracing absent patterns across his chest. He watched her without the shield of boardroom composure. "You don't look like a CEO right now," she murmured. "What do I look like?" "A man." He let out a soft laugh, but something in his eyes shifted. "I built everything from scratch," he said after a pause. Failure wasn't an option. Neither was weakness. She turned onto her side to face him fully. "Loving someone isn't weakness. For me, it's exposure." That word carried weight. He spoke about early investors who doubted him, about a father who measured approval through achievement, about learning quickly, That perception shaped opportunity. She listened without interrupting. He admitted something he rarely allowed himself to say aloud. I don't know how to integrate this into my world. She didn't offer a solution. Instead, she placed her palm over his heart. You don't integrate me, she said gently. You choose me. The distinction lingered. In that room, vulnerability felt safe, but safety inside four walls is not the same as courage outside them. Monday arrived without softness. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt different from the warmth of Sunday night. His posture straightened. His expression reset. By the time they stepped into the office lobby, distance had returned. Morning, he said, voice even. She matched it. Good morning. Assistants greeted them. Analysts shuffled documents. The rhythm of corporate life resumed. In the conference room, he referred to her formally. Miss Kincaid will walk us through the updated projections. No lingering glance. No subtle touch. No acknowledgement beyond professionalism. She delivered flawlessly, but the shift stung. Over the weekend, he had held her like something precious. Now he held the room like it mattered more. During a break, she watched him laugh easily with board members. Confident, controlled, entirely composed. Not a trace of the man who had confessed uncertainty hours earlier. The contrast was sharp. She understood duality. She understood context. But she also felt the divide. Private warmth. Public restraint. The whiplash wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. And quiet cuts deeper. Later that afternoon, she stood outside his office as two senior partners discussed upcoming investor optics. Hallberg's image remains consistent, one said approvingly. Disciplined, stable, no distractions. Orion nodded, accepting the praise without hesitation. Zariah felt the implication without it being spoken. No distractions. She stepped inside once they left. You needed something? He asked, tone strictly professional. I wanted to confirm tomorrow's presentation time. 10 a.m. Short, clean, efficient. She studied him carefully. You're good at compartmentalizing, she observed. It's necessary. For survival? She asked. For leadership? There it was again. His role always came first. He moved behind his desk, creating physical distance that mirrored emotional retreat. The weekend softness seemed almost imagined. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't dismissive. He was cautious. And caution, when stretched too far, starts to look like avoidance. She left his office understanding something clearly. He could be intimate. He could be vulnerable. But only where no one else could see. That night, she returned to the penthouse not for romance, but for clarity. He poured wine, unaware of the shift in her tone. Are you ever going to stand beside me publicly? She asked quietly. He paused mid-step. What do you mean? You know exactly what I mean. He set the glasses down. I need time. For what? To manage the narrative. She met his eyes steadily. I'm not a narrative. Silence followed. I don't want to harm what I've built, he said carefully. And I don't want to be hidden, she replied. The room felt different from the weekend before. The air no longer soft with discovery. Now it held tension. I care about you, he insisted. I know, she said. But caring about me in private isn't the same as choosing me in public. The words settled between them. He wasn't ready to step fully into the light with her, and she wasn't willing to shrink to stay. Softness had met fear, and fear was starting to look like cowardice. The quarterly board meeting carried more weight than usual. Revenue projections were strong. Expansion into 2 new markets looked promising. On paper, Hallberg Systems was stable, but stability, in Orion's world, required constant maintenance. He stood at the head of the table, presenting growth forecasts with precision. Zariah sat 3 seats down, tablet open, ready to clarify figures if needed. Their dynamic remained seamless in performance, yet something in the room felt different. Questions stretched longer. Eyes lingered more deliberately. A senior investor leaned back in his chair and studied Orion instead of the slides. You've been making some bold internal adjustments, the man said casually. New faces, new influence. Orion kept his tone even. Innovation requires strong minds. A few heads nodded, but the atmosphere shifted subtly. Boardrooms operate on nuance. Direct accusations are rare. Concerns travel through suggestion. Another executive added, consistency builds confidence. Orion understood what they valued. Predictability, image, familiarity. His personal life had not entered the discussion openly, yet the pressure to maintain the expected version of himself pressed quietly against him. He felt it. The need to reassure, the urge to protect reputation. Leadership, he reminded himself, meant shielding the company from instability. But the question forming beneath the surface was no longer about quarterly performance. It was about alignment. After the meeting, a smaller group remained. Coffee cups replaced formal agendas. Conversations shifted to tone rather than numbers. One senior partner, older and seasoned, approached Orion privately. "You've always understood optics," the man said carefully. "Investors value familiarity, stability, certain expectations." Orion held his gaze. "Be specific." The man smiled faintly. "Our brand appeals to a traditional base. Sudden deviations can create unnecessary noise." Deviation. The word hung in the air. Not explicit, not confrontational, but clear. Another executive added from across the room, "It's important not to complicate perception. The market reads everything." They spoke in codes. In corporate phrasing polished enough to avoid accountability. No one mentioned Zariah's name. They didn't need to. Orion felt the implication tighten around his chest. He knew the circles he moved in. He knew what was expected of men in his position. Partnerships were often strategic, not emotional. He could challenge them. He could push back. Instead, he adjusted his cuff and responded smoothly. "I appreciate the feedback." The conversation moved on. But something had been said, and something had been left unsaid. Both carried weight. Orion returned to his office alone. He replayed the conversation in his mind. The coded language, the subtle warnings. He had built his empire by anticipating risk. Confrontation in the wrong moment could ripple outward. He told himself silence was strategic. No need to escalate. No need to declare anything prematurely. Control required patience. He looked at the framed awards on his wall. Years of disciplined growth. Calculated decisions. Reputation earned carefully. Was one relationship worth destabilizing that? The thought disturbed him more than he expected, because it revealed something uncomfortable. He was measuring her against approval. His phone buzzed with an internal memo summary. Zariah had already corrected a financial discrepancy from the meeting. Efficient, focused, brilliant. He leaned back in his chair. He could have addressed the coded remarks immediately. Could have made it clear that his personal life required no corporate validation. Instead, he remained silent. Silence felt safe, but silence also communicated. And the message it sent was not neutral. Zariah did not need confirmation. She saw it in his posture when he returned from the private conversation. The slight tightening of his jaw. The measured distance in his tone during their follow-up discussion. She had spent her entire career reading rooms, where she was the only black woman at the table. She recognized coded language instantly. Later that evening, as they reviewed final revisions, she asked calmly, "Was there feedback I should be aware of?" He kept his eyes on the screen. "Nothing relevant." "That's not what I asked." He paused. "There were general comments about image consistency," he admitted. She nodded once. "And what did you say?" "I handled it." Handled it. Not challenged it. Not corrected it. Handled it. She understood what that meant. He had chosen containment over confrontation. The disappointment did not erupt. It settled quietly. She continued reviewing projections, as if nothing had shifted. But internally something had. She did not expect him to fight every battle loudly. She did expect him not to shrink when she wasn't in the room. Distance rarely announces itself. It accumulates. Over the following weeks, their interactions became efficient again. Still respectful. Still intelligent. But less warm. He stopped lingering after meetings. Stopped initiating late-night strategy sessions unless necessary. Kept conversations strictly operational during office hours. At the penthouse, he remained affectionate. In public, he remained reserved. The contrast sharpened. She began declining some weekend invitations, citing work. He noticed, but did not press. In board meetings, When subtle comments resurfaced about brand alignment, he redirected conversation without addressing underlying implications. No arguments, no dramatic confrontations, just erosion. One evening, as they stood in the elevator after a long day, their hands nearly touched. Neither reached. The space between them felt wider than before. Softness had encountered fear, and fear, left unchallenged, was beginning to create quiet separation. What once felt like anticipation now felt like caution, not because love had faded, but because courage had not yet arrived. Zariah noticed the shift in her body before she allowed herself to name it. Fatigue lingered longer than usual. Coffee tasted sharper. Her focus drifted in moments where it never had before. She tracked data for a living. Patterns rarely escaped her. She counted days quietly. When the realization settled in, she did not panic. She sat at her kitchen table with her planner open, fingers resting lightly on the paper. Pregnancy was not a careless possibility. She and Orion had crossed that line consciously. No accidents, no confusion about what intimacy could lead to. Still, timing mattered. Their relationship existed in fragments: private tenderness, public distance, unresolved tension. She drove to the pharmacy herself. No disguise, no dramatics, just intention. Back home, she placed the small white box on her bathroom counter. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the ventilation fan. She read the instructions carefully, not because she needed to, but because control calmed her. Then she waited. The result appeared clearly. 2 lines. She exhaled slowly. There were no tears yet, no racing heartbeat, just a deep awareness that everything had shifted. She pressed her palm gently against her stomach. This was real, and real changes everything. She remained seated on the closed toilet lid, long after the result confirmed what she suspected. The mirror reflected her face back at her, steady, composed, thoughtful. She studied herself not with fear, but with evaluation. Was she ready? Emotionally, yes. Professionally, yes. But relationally? That question carried more weight. She stood and walked closer to the mirror, fingers brushing her reflection lightly as if grounding herself. He would not react recklessly. Orion did not react recklessly to anything. He would calculate, analyze, assess impact. She already understood the layers he would consider: shareholders, press, board optics, family legacy. But this was not a press release. It was a child. She rinsed her hands and leaned against the sink, allowing a small smile to form. She had always wanted motherhood someday. Not as a rescue, not as an anchor, as a choice. Now the choice was before her. She would not approach this from fear. She would approach it from strength. The calm inside that bathroom felt almost sacred. No raised voices, no chaos, just clarity. Whatever happened next, she would not shrink. She invited him over that evening without explanation. He arrived in his usual controlled posture, suit jacket folded neatly over his arm. "You sounded serious," he said, studying her expression. "I am." She led him to the small dining table where 2 cups of tea waited. No wine, no candlelight, no intimacy cues. He noticed. She sat across from him, hands folded loosely. "I took a test today," she began. He leaned forward slightly. "What kind of test?" "A pregnancy test." The room held still. "I'm pregnant." He did not interrupt, did not question her tone. He searched her face first, as if confirming whether this was fear or certainty. "Are you sure?" he asked finally. "Yes." He nodded slowly, absorbing it. No explosion, no dramatic exit, just silence. His eyes shifted to her midsection instinctively, as if he could see beyond time. She watched him carefully. "I'm not asking for anything tonight," she added. "I'm informing you." That distinction mattered. The tea between them cooled untouched. And for the first time, the private relationship they had maintained could no longer remain compartmentalized. When he left her apartment, he did not drive immediately. He sat in the driver's seat, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring ahead without seeing the street. Pregnant, the word echoed in his mind. He had prepared contingency plans for market crashes, corporate lawsuits, global expansion risks. He had not prepared for fatherhood emerging from a relationship he had not yet defended publicly. He pictured headlines. He pictured bored reactions. He pictured his father's quiet scrutiny. Then another image surfaced. Zariah sitting calmly across from him. No pressure, no demand. Just truth. Responsibility tightened in his chest. This was not about a temporary relationship, not about a private affair. This was legacy. A child bearing his name. A child shaped by both of them. He imagined holding that child, teaching him or her discipline, vision, strength. Could he teach integrity if he hid the mother? The question unsettled him deeply. For years he defined himself by control. Now control felt fragile. He was not afraid of fatherhood. He was afraid of what embracing it publicly would cost. The following morning, Orion arrived at the office earlier than usual. He stood at the window in his office, city stretching wide beneath him. Everything he built existed because he guarded his image carefully. Image attracted capital. Capital sustained growth. Growth secured legacy. But what was legacy without courage? He imagined introducing a child one day. Would he say, "I protected my reputation first"? Or would he say, "I stood by your mother"? The board would not approve easily. Investors might question stability. Social circles might whisper. But whispers fade. Children do not. He pressed his palm against the glass lightly, reflecting on the irony. He once said he did not date black women. Now he would father a child with one. This was not punishment. It was revelation. The real test was not whether he loved her. It was whether he valued perception more than integrity. He turned away from the window slowly. No decision yet. Just awareness. And awareness is where transformation begins. The penthouse felt larger that night. Too quiet. Too ordered. Too controlled. Orion loosened his tie and stood in the center of the living room, staring at the city beyond the glass. Normally, the view grounded him. Proof of expansion. Proof of influence. Tonight, it felt indifferent. He replayed Zariah's voice in his mind. Calm. Certain. "I'm pregnant." There had been no demand in her tone. No manipulation. Just fact. He poured a glass of water instead of whiskey. He needed clarity, not distraction. He tried to approach the situation as he would any other major decision. Define variables. Assess impact. Determine strategy. But this was not a contract. It was a child. He walked into his home office and sat at his desk. For years, this desk had been command central. Every major move originated here. Now the question before him felt less corporate and more personal. What kind of man are you? He leaned back and closed his eyes. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to sit without drafting solutions. No advisors. No board members. No polished answers. Just him. And the truth pressing quietly against his chest. His father's voice echoed in memory. Men lead with discipline. Reputation is currency. Emotion clouds judgment. Orion had absorbed those lessons early. His childhood home was structured. Expectations clear. Praise rare but meaningful. Success equaled approval. When Orion excelled academically, his father nodded once. When he won a regional business competition at 17, his father shook his hand instead of hugging him. Affection existed, but it was measured. Failure was discussed clinically, not comforted. He learned that stability came from restraint. That personal choices reflected not only on him but on the family name. Dating, even in college, was monitored through subtle commentary. "Choose wisely," his father would say. "You represent more than yourself." He never questioned what that meant. Choose wisely. Stay aligned. Avoid unnecessary complications. He had interpreted those teachings as strength. But now, facing fatherhood himself, he wondered what lessons he would pass down. Would he teach his child to prioritize perception over authenticity? Would he teach them to hide what challenges social comfort? The memory of his upbringing did not feel cruel. It felt incomplete. And he was beginning to see that difference. He walked to the mirror in his bedroom and stared at his reflection. "I don't date black women." He said the sentence aloud this time. It sounded smaller than it once had. Why had he said it so confidently? It wasn't hatred. It wasn't hostility. It was conditioning. Most of the women in his social circle looked similar. Bored spouses looked similar. The events he attended reflected a narrow image of success. Somewhere along the way, he absorbed the idea that alignment meant familiarity, that stepping outside the pattern invited scrutiny. He told himself it was preference. But preference shaped by fear is not neutral. He thought about Zariah's composure, her intelligence, her refusal to shrink. Nothing about her diminished his status. If anything, she strengthened him. So why had he drawn that boundary? Because loving her openly would require confronting the comfort of his environment. And comfort is powerful. He inhaled slowly. Bias does not always announce itself with cruelty. Sometimes it hides behind tradition. Recognizing that unsettled him, but it also freed him. It was late, but he called anyway. His father answered on the second ring. "Everything all right?" "I need advice," Orion said. A pause. His father rarely heard that from him. "What's happened?" Orion did not mention Zariah immediately. He spoke first about legacy, about responsibility, about perception. Then he said it plainly. "She's pregnant." Silence. "And?" his father asked. "I'm evaluating how this affects the company." A longer pause. "Is that your first concern?" His father replied evenly. Orion frowned slightly. "It's relevant." "It may be," his father said, "but the first question should be simpler." Orion waited. "Do you intend to stand by her?" The directness caught him off guard. "She complicates expectations," Orion admitted. "Or she challenges them?" his father asked. Orion did not answer immediately. His father continued. "You built your name by defying assumptions. Don't become the kind of man who hides behind them." The call ended without further instruction, but the message lingered. After the call, Orion sat in silence again. His father had never been sentimental. He valued structure and public respect, yet tonight he had drawn a line clearly. Stand by her. Reputation builds wealth. Character builds legacy. He walked back to the window, watching city lights flicker below. He imagined holding his child one day. Would that child measure him by stock prices or by courage? He had spent years mastering image management, protecting brand stability, ensuring predictable outcomes. But children are not predictable. Love is not predictable. Growth is not predictable. What defines a man is not the absence of risk. It is the willingness to step into it. For the first time, the tension between image and integrity felt impossible to ignore. He was not ready to declare anything publicly, but something inside him had shifted. He no longer asked how to protect his reputation. He began asking how to protect his character, and that question would change everything. Orion did not choose a hidden corner. He chose a restaurant known for its open floor plan and recognizable clientele. Executives dined there. Investors hosted partners there. Visibility was unavoidable. When he told Zariah where they were going, she studied him carefully. No private room? No. That single word carried more weight than he admitted aloud. She arrived in a deep navy dress, elegant but understated. He met her at the entrance, instead of asking her to arrive separately. Small detail, significant choice. Inside, conversations paused briefly as they were seated. Not dramatically, just enough to register recognition. He felt it instantly. Eyes assessing, whispers beginning. He pulled out her chair without hesitation, sat beside her, not across from her, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "What changed?" she asked quietly. "I'm done pretending this doesn't exist," he replied. The table settings were crisp, the lighting warm, the room aware. He ordered confidently, asked her about her day without lowering his voice, laughed openly when she made a dry observation about a market forecast. Nothing dramatic, just presence. For the first time, he allowed their relationship to breathe outside controlled walls. And the world noticed. Recognition spread slowly across the room. A junior executive from another firm glanced twice. A woman at the bar nudged her companion discreetly. Phones remained mostly down, but curiosity sharpened. Zariah felt it too. Years of navigating high-profile spaces had trained her to read attention. She straightened her posture slightly, not defensively, but deliberately. Orion noticed. "Are you uncomfortable?" he asked. "I've been watched before," she replied evenly. He understood the layers in that answer. The stares were not violent, not overtly hostile. They were evaluative. Some curious, some surprised, some skeptical. One older couple at a nearby table whispered while pretending to review a menu. A man in a gray suit glanced over more frequently than necessary. Orion felt the urge to adjust, to retreat, to shrink the moment into something quieter. Instead, he leaned closer to her. "What do you want for dessert?" he asked casually. She smiled faintly. "Something bold." He returned the smile. The stares did not fade, but neither did his composure. Visibility, he realized, was not as catastrophic as he had imagined. It was uncomfortable, but discomfort is not defeat. Halfway through dinner, one of his long-term investors approached their table. "Orion," the man greeted smoothly, eyes flicking briefly toward Zariah. "Good evening," Orion replied, standing to shake his hand. "And you are?" the investor asked politely. Orion did not hesitate. "This is Zariah Kincaid, my partner." The word settled with intention. Not analyst, not colleague. Partner. The investor's brows lifted slightly, before settling back into neutral politeness. "A pleasure." Zariah met his gaze directly. "Likewise." After the man returned to his table, she exhaled quietly. "You didn't use my title," she observed. "I used the right one," he said. Across the room, two other executives leaned closer in conversation, heads angled toward them. Orion caught fragments of speculation. He could have ignored it. He could have shortened dinner. Instead, he remained seated, posture relaxed, tone steady. "And now let me ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between comfort and courage? If you have, you understand this moment. Stay with this story. And if you believe courage deserves recognition, support Love Tales with Mr. Easton by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Because the real test isn't over." When dessert arrived, the murmurs had not fully faded. Orion's phone buzzed once. A message from a board member. "Dinner choice interesting." He read it, locked the screen, set the phone face down. Zariah noticed. "You don't have to answer," she said. "I won't." For years, he responded instantly to anything that hinted at reputation management. Tonight, he allowed the message to wait. That was new. Another acquaintance passed by their table and paused. "Didn't expect to see you here like this," the man commented lightly. Orion held his gaze. "Why not?" The man hesitated, smile tightening. "No reason." "Good," Orion replied calmly. He did not raise his voice, did not overcompensate, did not defend. He simply refused to shrink. Zariah watched him carefully. Not with praise, with evaluation. This was not about one dinner. It was about consistency. When the bill arrived, he stood and offered his hand to her naturally, not theatrically. The room watched. He did not flinch. As they walked toward the exit, conversation softened around them. Orion placed his hand gently at the small of her back. Not possessive, not performative. Protective, intentional. The contact was subtle but unmistakable. Zariah felt the difference instantly. This was not a hidden touch in a parking garage, not a fleeting brush in an elevator. This was public alignment. Outside, the cool night air met them as camera flashes from distant street traffic flickered. No press waited. No announcements were made. Just two people stepping into the open. She turned to him once they reached the car. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "Yes, because this won't disappear tomorrow. I don't want it to." He opened the car door for her, then paused. "I won't pretend this is easy," he added. "But I won't pretend you don't matter either." The statement was simple, but it marked a shift, not a full transformation, not yet. But the first public step had been taken. And once a man steps into the light willingly, retreat becomes harder to justify. The dinner did not go unnoticed. By Monday morning, Orion's inbox carried a different tone. Not open outrage, not scandal, just carefully phrased concern. Clarify personal alignment, reassure stakeholders, maintain brand consistency. The board requested a private session ahead of the next quarterly call. The timing was deliberate. Zariah felt it too. Conversations stopped a second too quickly when she entered shared spaces. A few colleagues avoided prolonged eye contact. Others studied her with renewed calculation. In the executive conference room, the board sat straighter than usual. No casual jokes, no light remarks before business. One director began, voice neutral. "We value stability. Markets respond to perception as much as performance." Orion listened without interrupting. Another added, "There's chatter, nothing explosive, but shifts in image can create volatility." The word volatility lingered. They spoke about expansion risk, investor confidence, long-term positioning. They never said her name. They didn't need to. Orion understood the underlying message. Correct this quietly. Recenter expectations. Protect the brand. He felt the familiar instinct to reassure them, to promise steady optics, to signal containment. But something inside him resisted. For months, he had navigated tension privately. Now the tension stood in the open, waiting for his response. This was no longer about attraction. It was about ownership, and fear was pressing harder than ever. 2 days later, the stock dipped slightly. Not a crash, not a disaster, just a noticeable shift. Financial media outlets mentioned executive visibility shifts in speculative columns. Analysts debated whether personal headlines could distract leadership focus. The numbers weren't catastrophic, but they were enough to fuel anxiety. Orion sat in his office reviewing the chart. The red line curved downward before stabilizing. A minor fluctuation. Yet in corporate environments, perception amplifies minor changes into narratives. His chief financial officer entered without knocking. "We're seeing cautious trading behavior," she reported. "Nothing dramatic, but investors are watching." "Because of me?" Orion asked calmly. "Because markets don't like unpredictability." He absorbed that, without reacting visibly. Later, in the hallway, he overheard 2 mid-level managers whispering about timing and distractions. The words stung more than he expected. That evening, Zariah stood beside him on the balcony of his penthouse, her hand resting lightly over her growing stomach. "You look distant," she observed. "There's pressure," he admitted. "Because of me?" He turned toward her immediately. "No. Because of perception." She held his gaze steadily. "Perception can change," she said softly. "But choices define you." He knew she was right. The stock chart could recover. Integrity, once compromised, would not. The threat was not financial loss. It was retreat. The senior partner requested a direct meeting. He closed the office door behind him and sat across from Orion without preamble. "You're risking unnecessary instability," the man began. "We've worked decades to position this company as disciplined." Orion remained composed. "It is disciplined. This situation complicates that image." "It clarifies it," Orion replied evenly. The partner leaned forward. "You can handle this quietly. No public declarations, no dramatic positioning. Just keep it discreet." There it was. The solution they preferred. Hide it. Contain it. Return to the comfortable version of him. They understood. "And if I don't?" Orion asked. The partner's jaw tightened. Investors may reassess leadership reliability. It wasn't a threat shouted across the room. It was a measured warning. Orion considered the man in front of him. Mentor, ally, architect of early growth, but also a representative of expectation. You built this company on bold, but also a representative of expectation. You built this company on bold moves, the partner continued. Don't let emotion weaken strategy. Orion stood slowly. This isn't weakness, he said calmly. It's alignment. With what? The partner pressed. With who I am. Silence settled between them. The partner studied him carefully, searching for hesitation. He found none. That evening, Orion called an internal leadership meeting. No spectacle, no dramatic announcement, just clarity. He stood at the front of the room, posture steady. There's speculation about my personal life, he began. Let me remove ambiguity. He paused briefly. I am in a committed relationship with Zariah Kincaid. She is carrying my child. Both have my full support. The room remained quiet. He continued. This company's strength has never depended on conformity. It has depended on conviction. My leadership remains unchanged. My priorities remain aligned with growth, and I will not operate from concealment. A few executives shifted in their seats, but no one interrupted. After the meeting, he walked directly to Zariah's office. She looked up as he entered. "It's done," he said simply. "What is?" she asked. "I chose." Her expression softened slightly, but she remained composed. And I won't step back." For the first time since the pregnancy, he felt a release. Fear had pushed. Pressure had tested. Numbers had fluctuated. But the decision was clear. He would not build legacy on hesitation. Outside, markets would react however they chose. Inside, he had aligned action with conviction. And sometimes, that alignment is the only victory that matters. It began before sunrise. Zariah woke to a deep tightening low in her abdomen, different from the mild discomfort she had grown used to. This pain carried rhythm, intention. She sat upright slowly, hand resting over her stomach. "Orion," she said softly. He woke instantly. Months of anticipation had sharpened his reflexes. "What is it?" "I think it's time." No panic entered the room. Just movement. He helped her dress with steady hands. Grabbed the hospital bag they had packed weeks earlier. His usual precision now directed towards something far more human than quarterly forecasts. The drive to the hospital felt longer than usual. Traffic lights seemed slower. He kept one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting gently on her thigh. "Breathe," he reminded her quietly. She managed a faint smile. "I know." Inside the maternity ward, nurses moved efficiently. Questions were asked, monitors attached, paperwork signed. Orion did not leave her side. He watched the monitor register each contraction. The tightening lines felt personal, real, powerful. Hours passed. Pain intensified. Zariah gripped his hand harder than she ever had. He welcomed it. "You're strong," he told her during a difficult wave. "So are you," she whispered back. Though sweat gathered at her temples. There were no cameras, no board members, no observers, just effort, breath, endurance. And for the first time in his life, Orion felt completely irrelevant to the outcome. This was not something he could control, only witness. Labor stretched into the afternoon. Doctors checked progress. Nurses adjusted monitors. The room carried focus without frenzy. Orion remained grounded. He wiped her forehead with a cool cloth, held water to her lips, counted breaths during contractions. He did not check emails. He did not respond to calls. His phone stayed face down on the side table. When pain peaked, she leaned into him, fingers digging into his forearm. "You're doing this," he murmured. "You're bringing our child into the world." The word "our" felt different now. Not theoretical. Immediate. Between contractions, she looked at him. "You're here," she said, almost surprised. "Where else would I be?" She studied him carefully. No hesitation, no distraction in his eyes. Only commitment. As the medical team prepared for the final stage, tension in the room shifted. Instructions became sharper. Movements more precise. "Almost there," the doctor said. Orion's heart pounded harder than it ever had during a negotiation. He stood near her shoulder, voice steady despite the surge inside him. "Stay with me," he told her. "I am," she replied. The final push carried power. Then a cry. Clear. Strong. Everything stopped. Time reorganized itself around that sound. The nurse placed the newborn in Orion's arms first. He had prepared himself mentally for this moment. Preparation failed. The weight felt small yet immeasurable. His son's eyes fluttered briefly before closing again. Tiny fingers curled instinctively around the edge of the hospital blanket. Orion stared down at him. His chest tightened. He had imagined legacy in buildings, in markets, in expansion strategies. This was legacy. Alive, breathing, carrying both him and Zariah in a single fragile body. Tears blurred his vision before he could stop them. He did not wipe them away. He pressed his lips gently to his son's forehead. "I've got you," he whispered, voice breaking. All the rules he once declared confidently felt distant, small. The sentence he had spoken months ago returned. "I don't date black women." Standing there, holding the child born from the woman who reshaped him, he felt shame rise briefly. Not because of the child, because of who he had been. He handed the baby carefully to Zariah. Watching her hold their son erased any remaining doubt. He had almost allowed fear to dictate this moment. Almost. The room quieted after medical staff stepped out briefly. Zariah lay back against the pillows, exhausted but glowing in a way no boardroom success could replicate. Orion sat beside her, their son resting gently against her chest. He reached for her hand. "I need to say something," he began. She looked at him calmly. "I was wrong." She didn't respond immediately. "Not just about dating," he continued. "About control. About thinking I could measure love against comfort." Her fingers tightened slightly around his. "I was afraid of stepping outside expectation," he admitted. "Afraid of what it would cost. And now?" she asked softly. "Now I understand what it would have cost to hide." He leaned closer, pressing his forehead gently against hers. "I'm sorry for the hesitation. For every moment I chose caution over courage." She studied his face carefully, as if confirming the sincerity behind his words. "You're here," she said finally. "That matters." He looked down at their son. "I don't want him to inherit my fear," Orion added quietly. "I want him to inherit my growth." Zariah smiled faintly. "Then show him." He nodded once. "Not as a CEO, as a father." And in that hospital room, surrounded by quiet monitors and steady breaths, Orion Hallberg became more than the man who built an empire. He became the man who chose to build something greater. 6 months changed everything. The penthouse no longer echoed with silence. It carried soft cries at dawn, quiet laughter at midnight, and the steady rhythm of 2 adults learning parenthood together. Orion adjusted his schedule without announcement. Morning meetings shifted later. Late-night calls shortened. The empire did not collapse. It adapted. He learned how to hold his son with one arm while reviewing documents with the other. Learned the precise angle that calmed him during restless nights. Learned that success felt different when witnessed by tiny, watchful eyes. Zariah moved through motherhood with the same composure she brought to boardrooms. Structured, attentive, intentional. They did not pretend exhaustion didn't exist. They faced it together. He watched her in quiet moments, rocking their son near the window, explaining market trends in a soft voice as if the baby could already understand. Something in him settled deeply. He no longer viewed fatherhood as disruption. He viewed it as direction. At work, subtle resistance still surfaced occasionally, but the initial shock had faded. Performance remained strong. Growth continued. Fear had predicted disaster. Reality delivered stability. And in that stability, Orion felt the quiet confirmation that courage had not weakened him. It had refined him. Their relationship no longer lived in fragments. At home, decisions were shared. Parenting responsibilities rotated naturally. She challenged him on small things now, like how he defaulted to efficiency even in family moments. "You don't schedule bonding," she teased once. He smiled, adjusting quickly. At work, their dynamic strengthened. Zariah's strategic input gained broader recognition. Her analysis sharpened expansion plans. Teams respected her clarity. Orion began deferring to her openly in meetings. "Zariah, your perspective?" he would say, not as performance, as acknowledgement. Their conversations shifted too, no longer centered around secrecy or caution. Instead, they discussed long-term vision, how to balance leadership with presence at home. "You don't have to carry everything alone," she reminded him during one late evening review session. He nodded. For the first time, partnership felt equal, not hidden, not compartmentalized, balanced. She was not an accessory to his life. She was integrated into it. And integration required humility. He had learned that strength did not diminish when shared. It multiplied. The annual strategic summit approached. Not a social spectacle, not a charity stage, a corporate gathering of department heads, investors, and regional directors. The kind of event where leadership vision shaped the coming year. Orion stood behind the podium reviewing his opening remarks. Zariah waited near the front row, holding their son briefly, before handing him to a trusted family member seated nearby. The room filled gradually, conversations hummed, screens displayed performance metrics. Orion stepped forward. He delivered growth projections first, market resilience, new innovation pipelines, confident and composed. Then he paused. There's another strategic asset I want to acknowledge, he said calmly. The room quieted. Over the past year, our expansion strategy has strengthened due to the analytical leadership of someone who challenges me daily. He gestured toward Zariah. Zariah Kincaid is not only my partner in life, she is my partner in strategy. Murmurs rippled gently. He continued. Her insights have shaped our most successful initiatives. Her leadership strengthens this company. No hesitation, no qualifiers, just clarity. Zariah rose and joined him at the front. The room adjusted again, not with shock, with recalibration. Standing beside him, she did not shrink. Orion placed his hand lightly at her back, not protective, but aligned. We speak often about innovation, he continued. Innovation requires the courage to question assumptions. His eyes met several board members directly. I once believed certain boundaries protected stability. I've learned that growth requires examining those beliefs honestly. He did not confess publicly. He did not dramatize. But those who understood. Zariah brings clarity, strength, and integrity to this organization, he added. And I am proud to stand beside her. Applause began, measured at first, then fuller. Not everyone clapped with enthusiasm. But enough did. Zariah took the microphone briefly. Our strategy this year focuses on adaptive leadership, she said smoothly. Markets evolve. So must we. Her voice carried steady authority. They stood together as professionals, as partners, as parents. The transformation was no longer internal. It was visible. Later that evening, after the summit concluded, Orion stood alone in his office once more. The city looked the same. He did not. He thought back to the sentence he once declared confidently. The boundary he believed defined him. Now it felt like a relic from a smaller version of himself. He had not lost reputation. He had gained alignment. He had not weakened leadership. He had strengthened it. Zariah entered quietly, their son resting against her shoulder. You did well, she said softly. We did, he corrected. He walked toward them and kissed his son's forehead gently before meeting her eyes. I'm grateful you didn't walk away, he said. I wouldn't have stayed if you hadn't stepped forward, she replied. That truth mattered. Growth had not been automatic. It had been chosen. And if this story moved you, if it challenged something inside you, if it reminded you that courage reshapes legacy, then like, comment, and subscribe to Love Tales with Mr. Easton. Because love does not follow inherited rules. It follows integrity, and sometimes, the man who changes the most is the one who finally chooses to stand in the light.